Oh, hello all, it's Devora Krasnianski from Adai Ad, and our objective at Adai Ad is to help and provide awareness and education for successful marriage. And to that end, we have our website, adaiad.org, adaiad.org. We also do these webinars and workshops, coaching, and of course, answering any of your individual questions. And tonight, we're talking with Dovid Lieblich about Parnasa, or actually more importantly, now is the time to invest. Now is the time to build your financial wealth, particularly for newlyweds, for newly married, because the needs and the opportunities are different for newlyweds as those who are more further along in their saving or not saving. So we're going to talk to those who really get started, because Parnasa, money, is a big part of Shalom Bayis. That's just a reality, and there are ways to do it better. And that's why I'm really grateful for Dovid Lieblich to be talking to us tonight about this important thing. I also want to thank our co-sponsors with the Crown Heights Jewish Community Council, CHYE, and the Association of Crown Heights Shuls for bringing the awareness about this webinar to the community. And with that, Dovid, I want to just jump right in. I want to first introduce what you do, and then secondly, and maybe in the same conversation, how you got into this, because this is such an important topic of building your financial wealth.
Yep. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me here. Thank you everybody for joining. It's great to be doing this over Zoom. I've done a lot of these before. It's my first one over Zoom. So looking forward to the new experience of doing a seminar or a program like this over Zoom. It's important to me that this is as interactive as possible. So like, Devora said, if you can ask questions you have in the chat box, we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. Before I begin, begin my public speaking, I always like to just point out that I have a stutter. So if you hear a block or getting stuck on a word, you just know what that is. So we're basically the company that I am a partner of. We're a financial planning firm. We also do income taxes. So if you have any income tax questions, you can feel free to throw those in as well. We specialize in retirement planning, estate planning, and income tax planning, as well as wealth management of the portfolios. I thought it was, I think it's important just before we jump into, the details, that I just go back a little bit about my history and how I got into this. I didn't always think that I would become a financial advisor. I actually always had a dream of being a chef at one point. And I actually worked in a cafe when I was about 18 years old. I left yeshiva. I was about my second year of Zal, and I was never a big learner. Didn't enjoy really learning in school much. And when I left, I got a job, and I worked for about a year or so till I was about 19 years old. And I realized in the food business, in the restaurant business, I didn't see a future for myself there, and I actually went to a JLI retreat with my parents, and it was an incredible retreat, and I was with about 200 college students at that retreat, and that's where I sort of made the decision that I wanted to get a proper education on the English side of it, and wanted to build a future for myself. And that's when I signed up to get my GED. I did an intensive course for a few months and got my GED, and then enrolled in college. It's interesting to note that my GED professor actually ended up becoming a client of mine, which is pretty interesting. I always get a kick out of that. That the guy who was teaching me how to do the multiplications table, 19 years old, ended up becoming a client And I started going to a school, and at that time I started working for my father, and I fell in love with the financial planning and investment world. And I worked throughout going to college, and then I finished college, became a CFP, which is a certified financial planner. Once I was finished with college, I got a bachelor's in finance and investments, and then I became an enrolled agent, which is like a CPA for income taxes. So I specialize in income taxes as well. The purpose that I bring this all up is really because I was never in school. I wasn't the top of my class in growing up. I went to Latera, and the point that I want to make is that whether you thrived in elementary school and in high school, it's important to see where you are now and to make a path forward, and you can accomplish anything. And this is really the time. This program, like we said, was generally geared towards those who are newly married, and at this age, you really have a tremendous opportunity to determine your future. You're not going to get an opportunity like this, again, when you don't have the bills of somebody who has a few kids and a large household. You have an opportunity to make a move, to make a change, whether it's to go to school, whether it's to open a business, to go on a path. Same way I chose to go on a path that ensured that I had success, that I had financial success. It's really important at this time, and we'll delve into that in figuring out a path that will ensure that in a few years of time, you'll be able to support a growing family and have financial stability. Because what I found is, and I sit with clients who are already in their 30s with a few kids. They wish that they when they were in their early 20s or mid 20s, when they didn't have the responsibilities and the expenses that they had, that they were able to take the risks, to go to school, to start a business, and they stayed in a job that didn't really have much of a potential, but they were making maybe 40 or 50,000 each, which was 100,000. That's great for somebody who is just married without kids, and then you get comfortable in that job, and if it doesn't take you to the next level, unfortunately, you're going to find yourself struggling when you get to that point where you have a few kids and you want to buy a house. So we'll get into that a bit, of how to set yourself up for success for the future.
Okay, so thank you. So let's talk, just to jump right into it. It said that wealth is built not on how much money you make, but on how you use that money. So let's talk a little bit about what that means.
Yeah. So, it's really important. The biggest thing, what's important, is to organize your expenses. And before we jump into that, I think there's one thing that I want to point out, as a segue into that, which is, how much somebody really needs to live, right? If that's okay. And I had a client come into the office about a month ago, and he said, he's married with 2 kids, making about $130,000, and he thought that's great. I'm making $130,000. I can now buy a house. And I went through, a general budget on what it costs really to live. And my point is I want to educate you all just a little bit as far as as far as what it really costs to live, to have a family of 2 or 3 children, maybe more, but just even at that, what it really costs to live. And when I went through a budget item with him, it turned out his expenses were about $190,000 a year. And I just want to share my screen for a moment to illustrate that. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see it, the budget I have. And this just basically shows if you wanted to buy a house for a mortgage of $750,000. So if you want to live in the New York, Florida, California, any sort of major, Jewish frum hub, at this point houses have gone up. It's going to cost you about $900,000 to $1 million for a house. So if you had a down payment of $200,000, a mortgage of $750,000, it's going to cost you about $39,000 a year just for the mortgage payment. You can see if you go down the list, this is only showing a family with 2 kids. Imagine if you have 4 kids, 5 kids. In many areas, the school tuition is higher, and it shows here income taxes about $44,000. This is based on an income of about $200,000. Somebody who makes $200,000 would barely be able to afford to live, and this is without vacations, without any extras, and this is without even saving. So just I think it's important to drive home that point that where you are today, if you're making $100,000 and you feel safe and comfortable, that is great. But if you want to live, in a firm area in New York, Florida, California, if you want to live in a Jewish area and be able to buy a house, you really need to strive to be making between you and your wife at least $200,000. So whether that means going to school to become, just throw an example, to become a physical therapist, you could be making $150,000. A social worker and an accountant. I know that there are many women out there that go into a special education. I have many clients that are making $60,000-$70,000 a year. Female clients that they work part-time and they can make between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. So it's important when you piece that together. When you're sitting with your wife or sitting with your husband and trying to determine where you need to be. This is just sort of a starting point and a starting to start that conversation of of what you need to do to get into to sort of get there. So I hope that's helpful, and I'm sorry if I changed the topic, but I just thought that was important to bring up as a baseline.
The visual of it, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So they're talking about how you use that money, but so next there's a concept of pay yourself first. So first, what does that mean, and what kind of numbers are we talking about?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So I'm going to share my screen again because this is a great illustration of that. So you can see what does pay yourself first mean, right? You've heard that you've heard the saying pay yourself first. And what most people do is they work, they have their income, right? They pay their bills, they spend on food, on clothing, going out to eat, and whatever's left they save and they invest, right? And if you've tried that formula before, it usually doesn't work, and you'll find that you never end up actually even saving. Versus if you pay yourself first, what that means is you calculate what your income is, and then you determine how much you actually need to save, right, and invest, and you put that aside, and whatever's left, that you use to pay your bills and spend on the miscellaneous items after. So that's just really important to change your mindset on saving whatever's left, which doesn't happen, versus determining how much you need to save to reach your goals, right? Whether that's if you're currently saving to buy a house, or once you buy a house, saving for retirement, saving for bar mitzvahs, weddings, determining how much you need to save, and actually even putting that away. Now you ask me, how much do you need to save, right? Now, so it really depends what the goals are, right? Versus, if you're saving to buy a house or saving for retirement. Now, if you're saving to buy a house, you really got to put away every penny that you can, right? Because, like I said, if you're looking to buy a house in the New York area for $700,000 to $1 million plus, you're going to need $100,000 to $200,000 to put down. So you really should try, if you're making now, $100,000 or $150,000 combined with your wife, or $75,000, whatever it is, and your expenses are low, you really got to put away every penny that you have and try to live in I would say a meagerly fashion, so that you can get to that place. So the first thing everybody does, the first major expense that most people use all their money, they take all their, they spend everything, is to buy a house, right? So you want to make sure that you build that up so that you can buy that house and then start to focus on the future. So that's sort of when we're saving for a house. On the other hand, you don't want to get yourself caught in a trap where you get into a place where you say, you know what, I'm never going to buy a house, and I can only save $1,000 a month, and it's going to take me 10 years to afford a down payment. If you're in that sort of a position, you want to try to take a multi pronged approach where you put a portion of it towards the house and a portion of it towards long-term savings. So you're going to have bar mitzvahs coming up, weddings coming up. But if you think your goal of buying a house is within 5 years and you can reach it, then you want to try to put everything away into that bucket. And regarding when you ask about saving for retirement, how much to save. So as a general rule of thumb, if somebody wants to be able to maintain their lifestyle in retirement, which means that if you're living on $200,000 a year, right, as a family, you probably don't need $200,000 a year when your kids are out of the house and your mortgage is paid off, right? So let's say you need $100,000 or $125,000 to live, and you want to make sure that you can stop working at a certain certain time, at a certain time frame. Then the general rule of thumb is that you want to be trying to put away about 15% of your income. That's just the general rule of thumb out there, is that if you want to be able to maintain your lifestyle, right, and stop working at a certain point, then you want to put away about 15% of your income. And there's an exercise that I do with my clients that opens their minds a little bit to the idea, and it truly helps to understand the concept. And the scenario that I give is if somebody were to retire today, right? So I have a lot of clients that come to us. They're either a few years away from retirement, they're at or near retirement, and the general consensus is for somebody to retire not very comfortably, but to be able to pay their bills, they need about $100,000 a year to live. So if somebody needs $100,000 a year to live, they generally would get Social Security benefits, which would be about $30,000. So they have a shortfall of about $70,000, right? So where's that $70,000 coming from? Well, if you saved and invested, and you would need to have about $1,300,000 to give you an income, right, a passive income of about $70,000 a year. So if you take that, and that is in today's dollars, right? So if you factor in, if you're 25 years old or 30 years old, and you're factoring in now 35, 40 years from now, right? If you need $100,000 today, you may need $200,000 or $250,000 to live then. So if you need $1.3 million to retire today, you may need $4 to $4.5 million to retire in 35 years from now, right? And then you just simply back into it. And I have a financial calculator that I use, which is which can spit out a very simple analysis and we can just simply ask a question. We want to know how much do we have to put away over, let's just say, if you're 30 years old, for the next 35 years, right? So the next 420 months to get to, let's just say, $3.5 million at a 7% return, right? What would that number be? And it turns out that you'd have to put away about $1,900 a month, right? So if you put away $1,900 a month for 35 years, you would end up with about $3.5 million. Now, what's really important to note is, say that this person's 30 years old, and he says, you know what, I can't afford this to save now. I'm going to wait until I'm 40 years old, right? So now he only has 25 years to save, right? So if we run another analysis on this, right, and we say, okay, what happens if you only have you start saving in 10 years, right? So you only have now 25 years to save. So you start saving in 2032, right? And you only have now 25 years instead of 35 years. You have 300 months to get to the $3.5 million. That's 7%. Before, you had to put away $1,900 a month. Because you wait an extra 10 years, you have to put away now $4,200 a month. So this illustrates the importance of compounding interest, right? The first 10 years that you didn't put the money away, that 10 years doesn't have the time to compound, right? And at a 7% return, the money doubles every 10 years. The fact that you're missing out on those 10 years, right? And you started saving at 40 instead of saving at 30, it ends up being it ends up having a detrimental effect on your overall retirement plan. So I know that was a long answer, but hopefully that was sort of enlightening and helped.
Very important. David, where is that those calculators? Is that a particular software, or is that available?
So this is a software that I use. You can get it anywhere. It's called T-Value. Is a software that I use, but you can just pretty much Google any financial calculator. You're pretty much doing a future value formula where you're basically you want to know you want to have a certain X amount in 35 years, and it helps you determine how much you need to put away to reach that goal. Okay.
Okay. Let's talk a minute about what emergency fund means and how to determine how much to save in that.
Yeah. So emergency fund is pretty much a savings account that you want to have in case something happens that you don't have the finances for, right? So for example, if somebody owns a house, right, and they're living on, they're living paycheck to paycheck, and the boiler breaks, and that's $5,000, right? Where are you getting that $5,000 from, right? Or you have somebody that doesn't own a house, but that has a job, they have bills, and they lose their job, right? Now they have to cover the bills. So you want to have an emergency fund. The general rule of thumb is you want to have between 3 to 6 months of income in an emergency fund. I would say if you have a very secure job, right, then you can go to the lesser of that time period, 2 to 3 months. If you have a very, if you have a government job, if you have a job, as a teacher, or you have a job, or if you're, or if you are self-employed, and you have a business and you can't be fired, then you can go towards the lower side of that. But you want to make sure, at a minimum that you have, about 20 to 30,000, in an emergency fund, just in case. And I do recommend for any short-term savings that you open an online savings account. So I would never recommend anybody open up a savings account at the major banks, because you get about 0.01%. They have fees. They have, you have to have a certain amount of the account, or they charge you fees. The online banks like Ally Bank, Synchrony Bank, American Express, there's no fees to open the account, and you get a much higher interest. You get, 0.5 0.6. Last year before COVID, it was up to about 1.5% before interest rates went down. But you're still getting, many times higher than you would at your average bank. So that's definitely something that I would recommend for any short-term savings.
David, as far as like we were talking about that with the emergency fund, if we're saving up for a bar mitzvah, should that go into two separate accounts? Or what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So depending how far the goal is away, right? So if somebody has bar mitzvah coming up in a year, and they know it's going to be $8,000, right? Then what you do is you divide the $8,000 by a year, and you put the money into a savings account for the next year, so that you have the $8,000 when it comes up, right? And the same thing goes, if you want to go on a trip, right? You want to go to Israel, it's going to cost you, $8,000 or $10,000, and you want to go in 6 months from now. Well, how are you going to pay for it, right? You put the money away every month into a savings account, like I said, an online savings account, so that you can pay those bills. If the bar mitzvah, you're having, you have a child now, and the bar mitzvah is 13 years out, then I would definitely recommend to invest it, so that you can keep up with inflation, as well as have your money working for you. So it really depends on the term of the goal.
So as far as let's say does it make sense to have separate accounts, like for the savings and the emergency, that they don't kind of get pulled out?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. Yeah, so with the online banks, you can have as many accounts as you want. I think I have like 5 online accounts. I have a travel account. I have an emergency fund. I have a taxes account for income taxes. I have a furniture account, right?
IRA account?
I have a maaser account, exactly. So I have, I think, 5 or 6 accounts. There is a way, at least I know in Ally, because that's the online savings account that I use, that they made it now that you can open up one account and actually, divide the assets amongst that one account. So you can, let's say you have 10,000 in the account, you could say, okay, I want to put 1,000 towards X, 1,000 towards Y, 1,000 towards Z, and then when you go into the account, you can actually go in and see how much you have for each goal. So it's really up to you as far as if you want to have one account, you can have as many accounts as you want. There's no additional fees. The interest is the same. So it's really how organized you want to be. You can do it either way.
Let's talk for a few minutes about budgets, or some people like to call it spending plans. The budget sounds a little bit scarier, but it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah. So, I come up, I have a lot of clients that come and they ask me if I can help them with their budgets. And I tell them, there's not much I can do for somebody with their budget. As far as I'm not going to sit down with somebody and look through all of their statements and say, you went to Starbucks here and you spend $8 on this coffee. You shouldn't do that, right? Or you have help, 2 times a week in the house, cleaning help. Maybe only do it once a week. What I found works better is what you said before, is to pay yourself first, right? So what I do with my clients is we go through the formula that I did before to determine how much you need to save, right? So we say, based on how much somebody wants to live on in retirement, or depending what their goals are, we determine how much somebody should be saving, right? And then I tell them to go home and see if they can do it, right? If they can do it, then that money gets pulled from their account every month. So say, for somebody it's $3,000, right? Those funds get pulled from your account every month, $3,000, and then it's up to you to be able to live off the rest, right? To pay your bills. And most people spend what they have, right? So if they have money in the account, they'll go out to eat, they'll buy something, whereas if if the money gets pulled from the account like a bill, they'll figure out the rest. But so that's just on a general note. I do have a budgeting system that I use for myself, and I've recommended it to many clients and they liked it, which is, a fairly simple system. What I do is I have 2 checking accounts. I have a fixed account, and I have a miscellaneous account. So I keep two checking accounts. I'm going to share my screen again so I can illustrate that. So you can see here, say your income is $15,000 a month, right? Your income after taxes is just for an example, right? Is $15,000 a month, and your fixed expenses, including savings, is $11,000 a month, right? And again, I just gave a few examples of what a fixed expense is, and you'll see there I included your emergency fund, your short-term saving, and your investing. So you figure out what your fixed expenses are first, right? So let's say you come out and you say, okay, all my fixed expenses, and a fixed expenses is something that doesn't change from month to month, or barely changes from month to month, right? You know what it is. So you want to make sure that when your income comes in, you put the money into this fixed account so that you always know your bills are being paid, right? Your rent's being paid, your mortgage is being paid, and your savings, and your emergency fund are being accounted for. Whatever's left goes into the miscellaneous account, right? That's our groceries, clothing, Amazon orders, gas, right? Going out to eat. And it's your job to make sure that that you don't overspend in your miscellaneous account, because whatever's there, you have to spend. If it's the end of the month, and there's a small amount left, well, you don't do any Amazon orders for the end of the month for the last week, and you sort of hunker down. What I found helpful that many people do is if let's say the miscellaneous account is $4,000 a month, many people, if they get a $4,000 deposit into their account, or let's say if someone gets paid every other week, right? They get $2,000 into their account. By the end of the first week, the money's gone, right? So I generally would keep, I would divide the miscellaneous income or the miscellaneous amount by week, keep it in the fixed account, and transfer it every week to your miscellaneous account. This way, you know how much you have to spend a week. And at the end of the week, the money generally, it runs out, and you get an additional amount. So this is sort of the system that I use, and I incorporate, like I said, the online savings accounts for the emergency fund and the short-term savings. So just for give me an example, if I know that let's say spend $10,000 a year on travel. Right, I know I want to go on a winter break with the kids. I want to do something else. I know generally I spend $10,000 on travel, right? So I make sure every month I take $10,000 divided by 12, and in my fixed expenses goes into my Ally travel account. The $800 or $900 goes there, so that whenever I want to travel and I want to book tickets and it's $4,000 or $5,000, I go to my Ally account, I transfer the money to my account, and I pay the bill. I pay the credit card bill, and it's the same for any other expense that you have, right? Any other expense that is coming up, you want to include that in your fixed expenses. Hopefully that's helpful.
Very helpful, which segues right into that credit card issue where people put things on the credit cards. Let's talk to the problems of using credit cards as a lifestyle.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I'm sure, as you all know, there are great things about credit cards and terrible things about credit cards, right? If you use credit cards in a responsible way, there isn't anything wrong with it, right? If you pay your bills on time, there's nothing wrong with owning a card. You also get the extra points, which are nice. But if you abuse it, right? If you spend what you don't have, that's where the issue comes in. So in my system, right, in the budgeting plan that I have, my miscellaneous expenses get paid on a card, right, on a credit card. But what I do is I make sure to pay the card every week, right, so that I never build up, because what's interesting is when you have a debit card, right? And let's just say you have $1,000 a week to spend, right? When you swipe on a debit card, when you look at your account and there's $200 left, there's $200 left, right? When you go on the card, right, it's going up, right? And it's much easier to swipe because you don't necessarily have to look at your checking account to see if you have enough, right? So I always say that if you're going to swipe on a card, what I always do is, number one, I pay the bill. Personally, I pay it every week, so that I know where I'm holding. Because I've seen many people out there They get to the end of the month and they're like, oh my God, I have a $7,000 bill. I have $4,000 in my checking account, right? What do I do now? And then, and when you go through the orders, you don't realize how much Amazon adds up, right? All of a sudden you're just like, I'm spending $400 a week on Amazon, right? Whereas had I known, right, a week or 2 weeks before that I was, that I was building up and I didn't have the money in my checking account, I may not have done that. So, for somebody who finds themselves having a hard time on with using credit cards, then a debit card is definitely the way to go. You put the cards away until you can get into a rhythm and you know how to use it responsibly. What I will say with using cards, these are just a few general tips for using credit cards and keeping your credit high. So the first thing is obviously choosing the right card for you, right? And that's that is really based on your spending. There are countless of cards out there. There are credit cards that give you travel points. There are credit cards that give you cash back. I personally like the cards that give you the actual cash back, so that you don't have to use it for travel. You could take the cash out and spend it however you would like. The second thing, and the biggest thing that I found that people don't understand, is keeping your balances low. And what that means is say you have 2 cards, right? And each card has a $25,000 balance. So what the credit card companies are saying is that you are allowed to spend up to $50,000 a month, right? Or have debt of $50,000. Now they don't want you to use the $50,000, right? Even if you spend $50,000 and pay the $50,000 every month, that means that you're using 100% of your outstanding debt, right? Or an outstanding credit. So you want to try to keep your actual spending to under 30% of your allowed credit, right? So if you look on your statement on your credit card, you'll see the allowed credit, or the outstanding credit that you can use. One trick that you can use, if let's say you have you have maybe 10,000 in credit that you can use, right? And you have a month where you spend $6,000, right? A trick to avoid using up 60% of your allowed credit is to pay the bill before the statement generates, right? So I've heard people say, oh, I pay my credit card on time, right? I pay the full balance and I pay it on time, right? But they use a large amount of their outstanding credit and they have a low score, right? And that's because they're using all their credit, or a large percentage of their credit. Even though they're paying the bill on time and they're paying the full bill, they're still using a large amount of their outstanding credit. So if you pay your bill before the statement generates, right, not the due date, right, but if let's say your statement generates on the end of the month, so your statement generates on the 30th of the month, right, that means you have until the 15th of the next month to actually pay the bill, right? So you want to actually pay your card on the 28th before the statement generates, so that it doesn't get reported that you used, because what gets reported is the statement balance. That gets reported. So hopefully that can be helpful, because I found that to be an issue. The other one is obviously paying your cards in full and on time. I can't tell you how many people have come in and say, I'm paying the minimum balance, right? And many people don't understand there's a difference between the minimum balance and the statement balance, right? You want to pay your statement balance every month, right? You don't want to leave a balance on there. If you leave a balance on there, you're paying about 18 to 19% in interest on that. You're not going to get that investing anywhere else. So you definitely want to pay your balances in full. One other thing is you want to keep your accounts open and active. So let's just say you have a card, you have a Chase Sapphire Reserve card, right? Which I know is a very popular card, and they charge a $500 a year annual fee, right? And you don't want to pay the $500 annual fee because you opened up the card for the bonus. Don't close the card, downgrade the card to a free card, right? So you never want to close cards, because you always want to keep a high overall outstanding balance. And you also want to have a long activity of having your cards open, right? So if you're going through every year or every 2 years and you're closing cards and opening new cards, then you're not building a history of having cards open for a long period of time. So if you want to close a card, just simply downgrade it to a free card and allow it to run. And if you're worried about it being closed, every 2-3 years, just simply add one swipe and the card will stay open. So that's just, I think, really, really important to keep the average history of your accounts. And the last thing is, don't apply for credit you don't need. That's an obvious statement. Don't take on extra debt that you don't have to. So hopefully that is helpful. If anybody has any questions beyond that, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about these get-rich-quick schemes. Also, opening lots of credit cards for the bonuses that a lot of people are getting into and getting into trouble with.
Yeah. I see it all the time. I see people, they want to make 30, 50, 100% a year, right? They're not satisfied with an 8% return, with a 6% return, 10% return. They want more. And I've seen too many people lose everything by taking those extra risks. And what I think it's important to understand is there's a scale of risk, right? So if you have a scale, right? So I have a pen over here, right? You have a scale of risk versus reward, right? At the upper end of the pen would be the highest risk, highest reward, right? And that would be going to the store and buying a $1 lottery ticket, right? It has the highest risk, highest reward, right? You can spend $1 and make $300 million, right? Would you invest your money in that? Probably not, right? Even though it has a very high reward. And then you have on the other end of the scale, you have bonds, right? So you have the government issues bonds. They pay about 1%, 1.5%. That's considered guaranteed, right? So if anybody tells you something is guaranteed, the only ones who can say something is guaranteed is the government, right? They can say that something is guaranteed. So if somebody is offering you an investment, right, and they're willing to pay you a 30% return, right? They say, I have this investment, it's a 30% return, no risk, guaranteed, right? You run as fast as you can the other way, okay? Because if someone's giving you a 30% return, there's a reason they're giving you 30% because there's a tremendous amount of risk, right? So, for example, I have a lot of people going into cash advance, right? Which is fine as long as you understand the risk, right? But if somebody is giving you is basically you're giving them your money, right? And they're investing it, right? They're going ahead and giving a loan, and they're paying you 15%, right? There's a reason they're paying you 15%. I can guarantee you, if they were able to pay you 5%, they would, right? They're giving you 15% or 20% because there's an element of risk, right? The banks the banks are giving loans at 4-5%, right? So if they had a chance to pull money from the bank at 4 to 5%, right? Why would they pay you 15%, right? So it's really important to understand that, right? That if it sounds too good to be true, it is, right? And I want to share something here. This is an article that was posted on one of these sites in Crown Heights, or I shouldn't say an article, it was an ad posted on one of the sites in Crown Heights. We came upon this, a few years ago. And if you look at the sign, it says the ad, guaranteed 2% return every month, right? If you tell me if someone can guarantee me 24% a year, I'm all in, right? If they can truly guarantee, that's an incredible investment. And it says guaranteed, and they have obviously a heteriska on it. So that means it's definitely true, right? So what happens when you actually go into it, right? When you click into it, again, guaranteed 2% return every month. Take control of your investments now. Trade all commodities and stocks in one place. They'll even give you a free tablet if you invest, right? So they just said guaranteed 2% return every month, right? And they want your information. Then when you go to the end on the bottom, if you guys look all the way on the bottom here, it says high risk investment warning. High risk. They just said guaranteed in the ad, right? The ad says guaranteed. How's it guaranteed if it's a high risk investment? And it says they're trading in foreign contracts, which is extremely speculative. There's a high chance of losing your entire principal. It is highly speculative, carries a high level of risk, and may not be suitable. Now, how was that allowed, right? How are they allowed to advertise that, right? So that's just an illustration that you're going to see this all the time, right? So it's just important to understand that there's no fast way to get wealthy. I can tell you, my clients that are retired comfortably now with $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15 million, they didn't make it overnight. Okay, nobody, right? You'll hear of a case every now and then of one person that hit it big, right? Nobody's going to tell you the thousands who tried doing the same thing and lost all of their money. Everybody that I know that is living comfortably, that has built up a portfolio, whether it's in the stock market, whether it is in real estate, they didn't do some sort of a crazy investment and make a killing overnight. They invested over time, and they were very successful. So just be aware of what's out there. And if anybody says guaranteed and they're not the government issuing bonds, run the other way.
Thank you. So what are some mistakes that you see younger people making that can really hurt them in the future?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I would say number one is credit card debt, right? Like I explained before, a lot of people are getting into credit card debt. That really hurts you. It hurts you in the fact that you're going to have a hard time buying a house. You're going to have a hard time to save and to invest. So make sure that you stay away from getting into credit card debt. I've seen, so some other mistakes people make is while they're young and their expenses aren't high, they spend the money they have, right? They want to keep up with them Joneses, right? And the time where you're making money and your expenses are low, right? You don't have to pay, you don't have a mortgage right now. You can live in a one-bedroom apartment for $1,500 a month, right? This is a time to save, right? So yeah, I do believe in a balance, right? And you want to be able to enjoy life. You want to be able to to have a balance, but make sure that you don't just you don't go through these years where you have the ability to save for a down payment. You have the ability to put money away. You don't want to waste these years. The other thing I would say is there are many couples I see that they just don't talk to each other about finances, right? They don't have those those tough conversations. It's really important for the husband, for the wife to be on the same page, for the husband and the wife to both know what's going on, to know what the bills are, to know what the expenses are. It's important to be on the same page. If you're having trouble keeping up with a budget, there are countless programs out there that can help you categorize your expenses, so that you can see where you are spending, where you're going wrong, and you can make those adjustments early on, when you're able to. And the final thing really is to get the help, to get the advice when you're young. Ask for help, and make sure to take the time. There are many books out there. There are podcasts out there. There are courses out there. Get educated while you're young, so that you don't make the mistakes that many others have made.
Thank you. What about life insurance for young couples?
Excellent question. So, with insurance, and this is an area that I'm very passionate about, because I see a lot of young people getting, if I can say the word, screwed by doing the wrong thing, and I see it all too often. I have clients coming in, 30, 40 years old. They're sold, the wrong policy. They're not sold enough insurance, and so this is an area that that I'm extremely passionate about. So let's sort of dive into it a bit. I'm going to share my screen here. So there's two types of insurances, okay? And I imagine if you're young and you go to a shul, you've probably been approached by a life insurance agent, especially if you just got married, if you had a kid recently, trying to sell you life insurance. So it's important just so that you are educated, so that you can make the appropriate choice when that conversation happens. So there's two types of insurances out there. There's something called term life insurance and whole life insurance. Okay, I'm sure many of you have heard of this. So term insurance is basically, it's insurance for a set period of time, right? And the goal of it is to cover a financial loss, right? So if somebody is married with one or two kids, right, and they're making, let's say, $100,000 a year, if they pass away, there's going to be a shortfall of $100,000 a year. Okay, so how do we make up that? How do we make up that financial loss, right? Remember, we buy insurance to cover a financial loss, right? We have car insurance, right? So that if our car gets ruined, we can pay for it. We buy homeowners insurance. We buy renters insurance. We don't buy insurance that we don't need, right? So term insurance is the cheapest, most effective way to cover that need. Okay, the premiums are the same. So if you buy, let's say, a 30-year policy for about, let's say, for $1 million, let's say it's 40 something dollars every month. You pay $40 a month for the next 30 years, and you have $1 million of insurance. So if something were to happen to you, the insurance company sends you a check, and your family can use those funds to live. This is sort of a policy that you rent, right? You have it. If you ever want to cancel it, you can cancel it, and it expires after the 30 years. Okay? Versus whole life, which is a permanent insurance, right? So you're buying it. It's much more expensive, and I'm going to illustrate that in a moment. The actual costs of term versus whole, so you can actually see that. The premiums, like I said, are much higher. You do build a cash value, and you actually own the policy. Now, whole life generally takes about 15 to 20 years for your premiums, for your cash value to equal what you put in, right? So if you're 25, 30 years old, right, and you buy a whole life policy, most likely when you want to buy a house, you're going to need all the money that you can to buy a house, including the money that you put in to this whole life policy. And most likely, if you take it out before 15 years, you're actually going to take a loss. Okay, so just to give an example, if your premiums for a whole life policy were $5,000 a year, and after 5 years you put in $25,000, and you wanted to buy a house, right? Your cash value may be $10,000 or $12,000, right? So you'd be closing the policy at a big loss, and that's the majority. The majority of what I see are these policies that are sold to people that are young, that need to be putting all their money away into a vehicle that can grow for them, so they can take all the money out and buy a house. So this is definitely not something that you want to do if you're saving right now for a house. So who's term for and who's whole life for, right? So you definitely don't want to be considering whole life unless your income is, and I'll just throw out a number, at least $300,000 to $400,000, and that means that you already own a home. You're already putting money away for retirement, for mitzvahs, for weddings. So you're already putting away $40,000, $50,000 a year, and you have extra money. That's where it can come into play. But for most people out there, 95% of people out there, you just want to get a term policy. Now, then the next question that comes up is how much insurance to buy, right? How much do you need? So the general rule of thumb is for every 50,000 that you make, you need $1 million policy. Okay, that's because if something were to happen to you, the $1 million comes in, it'll give your family income of about $50,000 to $60,000 a year. Okay, so that $1 million will cover the income. So if you're making $100,000 a year, you need $1 million policy. Okay, and I also recommend that you get as long a policy as possible. So you get at least a 30-year policy. Now, regarding cost, I'll just illustrate that for a moment. If we took a male who is 24 years old, $1 million and in good health, $1 million 30-year policy would cost about $42 a year. A $2 million 30-year policy would cost about $91 a year. Now, what I recommend to a lot of people is something called a laddered approach to life insurance, and that is, if let's say $91 is too much for you, but you need right now, $2 or $3 million of insurance, right? You want to go ahead and get maybe a 15-year policy and a 30-year policy, so you can bring down the cost. And if you just look at an example for whole life insurance, you can see $1 million 30-year term is $42. $1 million whole life policy is $754 a month. Okay, so you can see there is, it is much more expensive. It can be up to 10 to 20 times more expensive. So again, that is my recommendation. Hopefully that helps to determine how much insurance you need, what type of insurance you need. So hopefully that can help.
Very helpful. Thank you. Some questions came in. I'm going to ask the ones that are more to the wider audience. Just going back to the credit card, when you were saying about closing credit cards or lowering, is it really necessary to keep the cards open?
Well, you want to have at least, when you look at your report, one item that you see is the longest account that you've had. So you want to for sure keep at least one account for as long a time as you possibly can, right? So there is the longest account that you had, and then they have also the average age of your accounts. So I would say, if you have a card, and also when you keep a card open, you have a higher amount of outstanding credit, right? Which is also a good thing. I would say, if you can change a card to a free card and put it into a closet or shred it, I don't see how it hurts to keep it on your report going. It can only help.
Thank you. Okay, what about bonds versus savings accounts? Because they're both about, what's the interest rate difference? And what's the difference? Go ahead.
Yeah, so, a savings account, or like I said, the online, it's called a high yield savings account. A savings account gives you, like I said, about 0.5, maybe now 0.6, 0.7% in interest. And it varies depending on interest rates, right? So like I said, before COVID, when interest rates were higher, it was paying 1.5, 1.6. Now it's paying about 0.5%. Now, if you were to lock the money away into a CD, let's say, with an online bank for a year, they may give you 1%, right? Or if you lock away for 3 years, you would get a higher return, but now your money is obviously locked away, right? So you can access it. So there's a risk, and there's a reason why the banks are going to be offering you a higher return, is because they know that the money is locked away for a period of time. Bonds, there's different types of bonds. I don't know if he's asking about bond funds or individual bonds. Owning a bond fund, which is an investment that owns, a few hundred bonds, that could go down in value over the short term. So, for example, just right now, as interest rates are going up, bond funds have gone down. Right now, they don't go down like the stock market does, like the S&P 500. When it goes down to 2-3%. But there is a chance for bond funds to go down a bit, unless you buy an individual bond, but then you have the same problem where you are locking it away, right? So you must hold it for the period of the bond, right? So let's just say, give you an example, New York State issues a bond, right, for 5 years, and they pay you a 3% interest rate, right? If you hold it for 5 years, then you get your 3%, right? But if you want to get out and interest rates go up, right, and you want to get out, now you're not going to get the full money back. You're going to get less. So there are risks in that. So if you want a risk-free way where you're not going to have any possible chance of decline, and you'll get a modest rate, then the online savings account is your best bet.
Thank you. Let's talk about putting money aside. So you said you have a tax account and you have a maaser account and you have a retire. So does someone pay taxes before or after their investment, like of the and they're putting aside for investments for retirement accounts?
Are you asking me if how much someone should put away for the maaser, if it's after tax or before tax?
Yes.
So I'm not a Merav, so don't hold me to this, but I believe it's after tax.
Okay.
You get maaser on your income after tax, but again, ask your Rav.
Okay. Okay. A few questions came in. They seem rather specific tax questions. Do you want to give out your information about how they can reach you for tax questions?
So again, I'm happy if you wanted to share, my information at the end.
Yes.
I would say, if you want to email me, feel free. I don't do taxes. I shouldn't say that. I only do taxes for clients who are also financial planning and investment clients. So I'm not taking on just individual income tax clients right now. But if you have, a question, I'm more than happy. If you want to email me, I can try to answer as best I can.
And there are other tax preparers in Crown Heights and beyond.
Plenty of tax preparers out there. Yes.
Some of these questions, like I said, are the tax questions that came in. They're good questions, and they really do need to have someone who can help you with them. But let's not put them for this conversation. I think that one other question, and then we're going to wind down. So, Devora, while I'm getting the question, do you want to share your information, your contact information?
So I mean, if you just simply Google my name, my site comes up, lfswealth.com. You can go there. You can email me. My email's there. Phone number's there. All my contact information is online. If anybody wants to reach out, it's pretty easy to find me. There is one other thing that I wanted to show, which I think is important, just something that not too many people are aware of, or if you are, maybe you may not be thinking about it right. And that's just a general idea of traditional IRA versus Roth IRA. If it's okay, I can just share that for a moment. I think that can be very helpful. Here we go. So there's something called a traditional IRA and something called a Roth IRA. On a general note, a traditional IRA, you get a tax break now, so you save taxes today, but you pay taxes later on. Okay, versus a Roth IRA, there's no tax savings today, but you save taxes later on. And just to give you an example of that, if say your income is $50,000 a year, so you're paying tax on $50,000. If you put $6,000 into a traditional IRA, your income drops from $50,000 to $44,000. So now you're only paying tax on $44,000. Okay, so that's where the income tax savings come in. Now, if you invest that $6,000 in your traditional IRA, and in 35 years from now you're 60 years old and it's worth $30,000, that same $6,000 is worth $30,000, and you want to take the money out, the whole $30,000 is going to be taxable. Okay, so you're saving some tax today, but you're paying tax in the future as well. If you take the money out before you're 59 and a half, for any needs, you would pay tax and a 10% penalty. So where does a traditional IRA generally make sense? It makes sense generally for somebody who has high income and is generally saving at least 30% on the money they're putting in. Right? So if you're putting in $6,000 into an IRA, if you're only saving $500, don't put the money into an IRA. There is no reason to put the money in an IRA if you're only saving 10 or 15%. So if you're in a very low income tax bracket, you don't want to put your money into an IRA and then have it growing long term, and then it's going to be taxable. So again, if you're in a high rate, you also don't want to be putting money into a traditional IRA if you're saving for a house, right? Because likely you're going to need all the money to buy a house for the down payment on the house, and you don't want to also be stuck paying tax and a 10% penalty, right? So you may have $30,000 in your IRA, and you're counting that towards the down payment, and all of a sudden after tax you're losing 40 to 50% of that. All of a sudden you only have 18 or 15,000. So you definitely don't want to be doing that. So if that explains a traditional IRA. A Roth IRA is where you have no tax savings today. So the same example, you're making $50,000 and you put $6,000 into a Roth IRA. Your income is still $50,000. Okay, that $6,000 grows to $30,000. Like we said, the same example. In 30 years from now, you're 60 years old. You can take the whole $30,000 out, no tax and no penalty on the whole $30,000. So all the growth is tax-free. Okay. Now, this is the one other thing with a Roth IRA, which is very helpful, is that the $6,000 that you put in, you can always take out without paying tax or a penalty. So if you need the money for an emergency, if you need the money for a down payment on a house, you can always take out the money that you put in tax-free. Okay, because again, you were already taxed on it. The other tremendous benefit of a Roth IRA, especially for somebody saving for a house, is the first $10,000 in gains in a Roth IRA is tax-free for your first home. Okay, so but the account has to be open for 5 years. So you have to have the Roth open for 5 years. But if you have the Roth open for 5 years, and let's just say, for example, you put in $6,000 a year for 5 years, so you put in $30,000, it grew, the account is worth now $40,000. You could take the whole $40,000 out for a house tax-free. So I really like the Roth IRA as an option for somebody who is saving for a house. Let's say someone has $15,000 a year they're putting away for a house, or $20,000 a year for a house. I really like the idea to put away $6,000 of that money into a Roth IRA. And the way I think of it is, if you need the money for the house, you can take it, right? There's even the $10,000 you can take tax-free. And if you don't need the money for the house, you now have this funds growing tax-free for the next 30, 40 years. And so that's just, if somebody, even if somebody is in a high income tax bracket and they're saving for a house, you still may want to look at the idea of a Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA, because of the fact that it's much more flexible for paying, for down payment on a house. And this is just a summary of that. Like we said, a traditional IRA, your contributions are tax deductible. Withdrawals are subject to income taxes. Anyone can contribute to an IRA, and you can put $6,000 a year into a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. If you're over 50, you can put $7,000 out. With the traditional IRA, you must start taking money out at 72. This is an old version, but they changed the law now to 72 is when you must take money out. Versus, like I said, a Roth IRA, the contributions are not tax deductible. There's no income tax savings on it, but the contributions can be withdrawn without any penalty, and you're not required to take money out at 72. So it's just a great option. Leaves you a lot of flexibility. And I just saw a quick question about a SEP IRA and a 401k. If it's okay if I'll take that fast. So the same thing with your work. So a 401k is an employer plan. So your job has to offer it. If your job offers it, you can put away $20,500 into an employer plan for as of year 2022. And many employers offer the chance to do traditional or Roth. So the same scenario the same scenario I gave about where you're holding in life. If you're saving for a house, that sort of applies. And regarding somebody asked about a SEP IRA. SEP IRA is somebody who is self-employed. If you are self-employed, you can put away up to 20% of your income or 25% of your salary, depending if you're an S corporation or a partnership or self-employed, but that allows you to put 20 or 25% of your income up to $61,000 for 2022. But the SEP doesn't give you a Roth option. But just to give a sneak peek, there is a back way to do a Roth with the SEP. Talk to your accountant and a financial advisor about that. Just FYI. So.
Do we have a few minutes to talk about investing? Just like a quick overview. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sure. So in investing, our investment philosophy, so the way that we invest, we believe in investing in a diversified portfolio. So we invest in index funds and ETFs, which is basically a group of stocks. So if you give an example, the S&P 500 index, if you heard of it, it's the top 500 companies in the United States. So if you want to know the easiest, simplest way to invest without knowing much, you put your money into the S&P 500 index. By owning that, you will always own the top 500 companies in the United States. So you don't have to do anything, and you'll always own the top 500 companies in the United States. Now, you do have to be, you do have to be cautious. By, the S&P 500 generally averages about a 10% annual return, but it does fluctuate, right? So, for example, during COVID, it went down about 35% for a short period of time, and then it came back. You have fluctuations in 2008, in 2000, and 2001. So you want to be careful. That's you want to use that for money that is long term. If you invest in that long term, if you invest in a diversified portfolio long term, you're going to do well. And if you're investing long term, you can withstand the short term declines. I heard an interesting saying the other day that if the stock market, when I say the market, if it always went up, if it never had any fluctuation, then there would be no risk. There would be no return, right? If everyone knew that it would always go up, then everyone would invest in it, and then there would be no marketplace for it. So the fact that it fluctuates, it's a good thing, because there are people that invest in it. People buy, people sell, and if you get rewarded by investing by staying in it. So if you can handle the short term volatility of the market, you'll do very, very well over a long period of time. And I definitely would advise against trying to pick individual stocks, trying to time the stock market. It's been proven there's no way to time the stock market to get in and out. So just try to keep things simple, and definitely would advise if you don't know how to invest, to contact a financial advisor, and they can help you.
All right, so much. Thank you. The recording will be available for people who want to unpack this slowly. David, any final thoughts?
I would just say to take the time to have a conversation with your spouse. Figure out how much you can save, how much you can invest, and get to it now. This is the time. Don't push it off. Don't delay it. There's no better time than now. So definitely get going on it.
Thank you so much, David. Throughout the talk, I was putting some links. Adai Ad has prepared some discussion starters for money dates to talk about money, to talk about make the conversation a little bit easier. So if you wanted to check that out, there's a lot of other resources on the Adai Ad website about money, about communication, about marriage. And if you have any questions or any ideas for other upcoming topics, definitely reach out to us at info@adaiad.org. And thank you, David. Thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to talking to you about other important topics about marriage. So thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much.